Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a movie review from the Disney Channel original movie lineup. And the movie in question is going to be The Scream Team. This 2002 movie has kind of faded into obscurity. when I bring this movie up to people, they have no idea what it is. And it's kind of on the same wavelength of like Phantom of the Megaplex, or maybe even Don't Look Under the Bed. Some people even don't know what Under Wraps is. They've only heard of the remake that's coming out. They've never actually seen the original Under Wraps. And I'm just like, this is blasphemy. How have you not heard of this film? But it is, to be fairly stated here, this movie is not the most spectacular movie ever made. I'm just going to put that out there. And for those that are watching this review and have never watched the movie, I'm going to give you a fair warning on this. Don't go into this film expecting it to be special. It is a Disney Channel original movie, after all. Very rarely would I say that DCOMs actually hit on something unique, different, stand out, and memorable. They do have memorable movies, but they're not anything that you'll see in a theatrical release or something with a bigger budget. These are low-budget films. These are made for children. Keep that in mind before you go watch this. Now, with that in mind as well, this movie is just a fun time to be had. It's very spooky, some over-the-top acting, some heartfelt moments like every DCOM has. It has a level of cheese, humor, even some kind of scary aspects dealing with a certain character in this film. I would go out of my way to recommend this film for kids horror enthusiasts, or people out there that like to watch nostalgic things. Like if you come to my channel, you probably like Goosebumps books or things like Goosebumps. This is a perfect example of something to kind of add to your palette for around this time of year. Especially since this movie came out in 2002. Around that time, there was no Goosebumps books coming out, at least brand new. And there were some other series R.L. Stine was putting out, but they weren't the same feel. And a lot of the times, kids around this time period in the early 2000s would look to DCOMs, and they would look to other forms of media to get their kids' horror fix. And this is one of those films. And I want to really talk about it and kind of dive into it. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So these two kids, Claire and Ian, recently discover that their grandfather has tragically passed away, and they were really close with their grandfather, specifically around Halloween. This movie tries to highlight that these kids would go visit their grandfather in Massachusetts, in this small town where it's known for its Halloween festival. They would try to help him work on his automatic pumpkin carving machine, and that's something that they look back on in a video memoir at his funeral, or I guess his, I forget what you call it, but it's something like that. And, the kids are Ian and Claire, right? Ian is especially hurt by this because he was really close with his grandfather. And when people try to console him, he just wants to get away and just grieve on his own. So he goes down into his grandfather's basement and gets into his workshop. Now, this is where, for the first time in the movie, you're going to get that heartfelt moment here, where Ian's father comes down to try to talk with him and, try to help him, maybe ask him what's on his mind. You can talk to me about whatever. And Ian's basically on the lines of, it doesn't matter how much talking I do, it's never going to bring him back. What I'd give for just one more day with him. And his father basically assures him that says, hey, look, you had a better relationship with him than I did. He was my own father. Growing up, he was always too busy for me. And, this disagreement they have about the perspective of, like, the grandfather kind of angers Ian, and it makes him really upset. And, it gets pretty serious, almost. I wouldn't say too serious, but there is something there to kind of humanize the characters there. There is some stakes here, dealing with like grieving and a loss of a person. And as well, the movie also before kind of shows you in cheap CGI that there are these spirits that exist in the afterlife that flow throughout the house, and they exist around the area. And when the grandfather has passed away, he is now in the afterlife. And then this will tie into a new discovery, as later on that night, after everybody leaves the funeral, Ian and Claire are talking with their father, and the father brings up some town history, and brings up Zachariah Cull. Now, Zachariah Cull, there's an urban legend like a couple hundred years before the events of the movie. Zachariah Cull was said to be this person who was a fire maniac, may have dabbled into the dark arts, witchcraft. No one really knows. But what happened was his house inexplicably blew up and killed his wife. And what happened was the townspeople basically, boycotted and mutinied, I guess, the government, and took Zachariah and took him to the stake and gave him like a public execution, basically, and burned him at the stake. Then Zachariah's spirit was so angry and so hurt that people didn't understand the truth, decided to stay back in the afterlife, and now supposedly his spirit is trying to seek revenge for all the injustices done to him in that regard. And this kind of spooks Ian a little bit. He starts to think that, maybe if there's an afterlife, what does that mean, right? And there starts to be hints of maybe that something's trying to communicate with Ian. But at first, it kind of throws you a monkey wrench because there's revealed to be a prank by his sister Claire, trying to scare him, while he's trying to go to sleep. And he wakes up and he screams for his dad, and his dad chastises his sister. And once they leave, Ian's by himself, and he starts to see a vision or a spirit of some sort moving around his room, trying to communicate with him. And he gets really caught up in this. He's pretty much convinced that there's a spirit, in this house that could be real. Maybe it's their grandfather. Now he has to find a way to talk with his grandfather. So Ian goes down the next day. He goes down into the basement to grab this machine to try to capture the spirit or whatever it is. And there, he's hoping that it's his grandfather. Maybe by capturing his grandfather, he can talk to it. Now, here's the kicker. So when he takes the machine upstairs, he notices that there is a spirit up there. So he tries to scare it away, and it goes into hiding in the room. So he puts a little jar to try to capture whatever is in there, and he tries to capture it in the jar. And when he looks in the jar, he realizes that the spirit isn't his grandfather, but it's a spirit of this man with a parachute. They call him Jumper, come to find out. And when he captures this spirit, another spirit comes out of nowhere and basically assures him that, hey, look, we're a ghost. Ghosts are real. And that's when Ian tells Claire, and he goes, I think my granddad's been trying to communicate with us. So, so basically, after they go to try to, coax the grandfather out of hiding it that's been in Ian's room, something scares away Ian and Claire's granddad, and it's believed to be Zachariah Cull. Now, these other two spirits have reassured him and Claire that, yes, that's Zachariah Cull. He's the meanest spirit around these parts. Basically, he captures souls of the recently deceased and uses them to gain power. And the part of his power is that he can illuminate fire, and he uses that as a ploy for revenge because he is dissatisfied with the way he died and he has unfinished business left. And unfortunately, their grandfather has been captured by Zachariah, and now they have to figure out how to get their grandfather back. So the two ghosts find their way, one of the ghosts, I think, is the ghost played by Eric Idle. He's like this dead, British soldier. It does take place in Massachusetts. It's kind of implied that the soldier probably died in like Revolutionary War. He's like a British soldier. Tries to flee because the kids are prodding him, and they follow him basically by looking up in the sky and seeing that these spirits, now they can finally see these spirits, which is kind of plot convenience there, but they can see these spirits, and they're going to this really old building that out in the middle of the country that nobody really knows. It's kind of off the grid, and they follow the spirit trail, and they break into this room, and they discover that this room is a portal to the afterlife. And this is where they re-encounter Eric Idle's British soldier ghost, and then they encounter Kathy Najimy's ghost, who is kind of like the bookkeeper of the portal to the afterlife. She's basically sentenced to eternity to make sure other people go into the afterlife, but her herself can't go. And what's also revealed is that the ghost they captured, Jumper, and the British ghost played by Eric Idle, I can't remember the ghost's name. It's fleeing my head. But they are a part of this group called the Soul Patrol. And what they do is they go out and hunt for unaccounted for spirits, which one of them happened to be Claire and Ian's granddad. And now that he's basically been captured by Zachariah Cole, there's really no way to save his soul unless they go and plead with Zachariah to let him free. So Claire and Ian basically try to make a deal with them to go try to take down Zachariah, and they basically agree, and they agree to meet up later. Now when Claire and Ian go home, the father has been worried. The police were called, and the father basically is like, what's going on? And Claire and Ian basically, for the next course of, I guess the second act of this movie, tries to keep it hidden from him, but eventually come to find out he kind of gets told what's going on, and he believes his own children. This never happens, by the way, in kids' horror, the parent actually believing the child or the children in question, but it is kind of cool. Now, to also preface this with more context here, there's this guy going around town who basically took over the necessity business when their grandfather retired. He and his company and his family became successful. Now, this guy, he's kind of, I think he's like the mayor or something, during their grandfather's funeral was looking for a particular book in their grandfather's library, kind of going through it. And it turns out that this guy may or may not have possession of this book with all this information about this person called Zachariah Cole. Now, what happens next is that all these weird string of events start happening when these kids try to go find Zachariah Cole. They meet with the Soul Patrol, they go into this abandoned mine shaft, and they lose one of their spirit friends, Jumper, to Zachariah Cole, who's now gotten even more stronger. And another thing that happens is the kids feel like they have to go find the book because they think the book has information about Zachariah Cole in it, so they have to break into the mayor's house and get it, and the father actually covers for them, and the father helps them find the information. And Zachariah Cole, they finally learn what happened, and they tie it together to one of these string of events that happened with Claire and Ian. They go to the site where the Zachariah Cole's house used to be, and they notice a pipe. Now, this would have been a very old house. They wouldn't have had gas piping back then, but they think that Zachariah Cole was an inventor, and maybe using gas was trying to invent a way to power lights without electricity. They can just use gas because there's gas all over the region underneath the ground. And basically Claire comes to that conclusion. Putting pieces together, that leads to the events near the end where the Soul Patrol basically team up with Claire and Ian to confront the mayor and the big bad Zachariah Cole. who is going to be at the Halloween festival, and they plead with Zachariah to, stop what he's doing and to move on into the afterlife and to release all the souls that he's captured because they know the real truth. And basically, when the mayor, there's a big revelation with the mayor. I'm not going to spoil that. But once the mayor apologizes to Zachariah, Zachariah learns to let go, and all the souls are freed. And then there's a, Disney Channel original movie ending for the film, and I'll put it that way. So basically, in a nutshell, that is the Scream team. Let's start off with the positives about this movie. I love the actors: Eric Idle, Kathy Najimy, and Tommy Davidson. Kat Jennings. I mean, to name a few actors that are pretty well known. I think they are all phenomenal in this movie. Kat Jennings played Claire. Kathy Najimy played the ghost woman. I keep forgetting Eric Idle's character's name and Kathy Najimy's character's name. I only remember Tommy Davidson's character's name, Jumper. But basically, the cast was so much fun. They each had their own personalities, and they all brought that layer of, cheesy fun that DCOMs can offer. The setting, it felt like Massachusetts. I have family that live in Massachusetts. It felt authentic. It felt nostalgic. It felt like early 2000s cinematography. I think the writers of this film wrote a bunch of stuff for Disney Channel. I know they did quite a few movies. I think it's Bergensen. I think that's his name. I forget his first name. But I know he's done quite a few Disney Channel original movies. And I think this one is just one of those fun, spooky films that when you look back in the catalog of Disney Channel, you're going to see movies like this. But maybe nothing as... It's hard to find something as charming as this. Maybe something like Under Wraps or Phantom of the Megaplex might be something charming like this. I wouldn't say it's scary, but it's cute. You know what I mean? And it's heartfelt and it's wholesome feeling. That's what I would say. The plot with Zachariah Cole is another thing that I found really intriguing. The way they pulled off this character, it is early 2000 CGI. It is very dated. The way the ghosts look, some of the soundtrack stuff just doesn't mix well. But the way that this character looks actually holds up, and it's actually pretty frightening. This guy looks creepy. I mean, genuinely, and I'm not exaggerating on that. Like, this is probably one of the biggest standout characters in the whole story, and I'm glad they were able to pull it off and execute it pretty well. And the whole coming of age story where it has the Disney Channel cliche ending and stuff. In the lens of it being a Disney Channel movie, I really enjoy that. Getting into the negatives I have with it, I think a lot of the negatives I have with this film comes down to the screenplay and the writing itself. It just seems kind of corny and kind of forced. A lot of plot convenience going on. This is a very padded story. Getting into specifics, I don't like how choppy the first half of this film is. This is an hour and 40-minute long movie. It felt very choppy in the first half of the film. I felt like they could have cut maybe 20 minutes off the first half and maybe added 10 minutes to the second half, where all the good stuff starts happening, all the revelations and all, the extra scary stuff that's, well, I don't want to say scary, but extra spooky stuff that starts happening happens in the second half. And I feel like all the focus was put into the exposition and the build more than the actual payoff and the climax. I think just little tweaks there could have made this movie a lot better. Also, another negative I have, as a whole encompassing story here, there's a sense of disbelief that you're going to have to put at the door when watching this. But I have to say, even when doing that, a lot of this film comes off mildly redundant. And I'm not trying to bash this film because I really enjoy it. But getting into plot semantics here, a lot of the redundancy comes from, like I said, the plot convenience just pushing this story forward. And it just makes no sense. I'm not saying it lacks logic, but some of the things really don't make sense. And it just kind of gets in the way of enjoying the story. And it kind of flattens the story as well. It kind of makes it boring, kind of predictable. kind of cliche. And I'm not going to be around the bush and not say those things don't exist, because they very much do in this film. But overall, I think this movie, for what it is, I enjoy it. I enjoy it immensely. I don't think it's a 4.5 or higher if I had to rate it from 0 to 5 stars, but I do think it's underrated. I do think it's a hidden gem in the DCOM arsenal. So for a 0 to 5 star rating, I think I'm going to give this movie here a 4.1 out of 5. I deducted 0.9 off for, the clichéness and all the other problems I said earlier collectively. And I think that's a fair grade for this movie. It's not nowhere near the best of DCOMs, or kids horror for that matter, but it is a fun time, and for a DCOM movie, I think most people will really enjoy this. So yeah, that's my review of the Scream Team. Let me know in the comment section if you have ever watched this movie. Did you love it or did you hate it? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.